For 20 years, the cameras have captured a perfect image. Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban, holding hands, dodging rain, smiling through every scandal. They look like a miracle. A love story that survived the chaos of fame. But behind that image, behind the red carpets and the award show kisses, Hollywood always whispered about a ghost. A third person in the room who never left. Someone who knew the cracks in the foundation before anyone else did. That person is Russell Crowe. Not a jealous ex. Not a villain. But the one man who knows exactly where the bodies are buried. He has stayed silent for decades. Through the rumors. Through the tabloid headlines. Through every late-night joke. He kept his mouth shut because he made a promise. A promise to a woman who was falling apart. Until now. Russell finally broke his silence. What he said wasn't about anger. It wasn't about revenge. It was about something much deeper. A hidden truth about loyalty, survival, and a promise made long ago in an empty field in Australia. What did Nicole really run from? And why is Keith the only one who could catch her? Take a breath. This story does not have villains. It has survivors. And sometimes, the people who love us the most are the ones who hurt us the least. Comment below, do you believe old friends can ever really let go? The year is 2001. Hollywood is glittering with confidence. But inside a small house in Sydney, Australia, a woman is hiding from the world. Nicole Kidman had just signed the papers that ended her 10-year marriage to Tom Cruise. The world watched it happen like a car crash in slow motion. She had been the perfect wife. The red carpet smile. The graceful wave. The quiet support. But when the marriage ended, the mask cracked. Photographers followed her everywhere. They captured her crying outside a lawyer's office. They printed the photos on magazine covers with cruel headlines. She could not buy groceries without being watched. She could not take a walk without being judged. So she ran. Not to New York. Not to London. She ran to Australia. Her home. Her childhood land. The place where nobody cared about Oscars or box office numbers. That is where she found Russell Crowe. Now, Russell at that time was the biggest movie star on the planet. Gladiator had just won the Oscar for Best Picture. He was the man with the sword and the anger. The media called him volatile. Dangerous. Unpredictable. But Nicole saw something else. She saw a man who was also trapped. Because Russell was also lonely. Fame had built a cage around him. He could not walk down a street without being Maximus. Without being the gladiator. He was tired of fighting. They met at a small gathering in Sydney. A mutual friend introduced them. There were no cameras. No publicists. Just two exhausted people who understood each other instantly. The tabloids went crazy. They printed photos of them having coffee. They wrote stories about secret romances. They invented hotel room meetings and late-night drives. But the truth was much simpler. And much sadder. Russell and Nicole were not lovers. They were wounded animals hiding in the same cave. He would pick her up in an old truck. Not a limousine. A truck with dust on the windows. They would drive for hours into the Australian countryside. Past the farms. Past the kangaroo signs. Until the city disappeared completely. Sometimes they talked. Most of the time, they did not. Russell knew something that most people do not understand. Silence is sometimes the loudest form of help. Nicole would stare out the window. She would watch the fields turn gold in the sunset. And she would cry. Not loud crying. Quiet crying. The kind where tears just fall without sound. Russell never reached for her hand. He never said, "It will be okay." He just drove. He let the road do the healing. Later, a friend of Russell's would reveal something strange. Russell made a promise to Nicole on one of those drives. He pulled the truck over near a dried-up riverbed. He turned to her and said, "I will never lie to you. Not once. Not about anything. In Hollywood, that promise is rarer than gold. Agents lie. Publicists lie. Friends lie for money." But Russell meant it. He had been lied to so many times himself. He knew the taste of betrayal. He refused to serve that dish to Nicole. So he became her vault. Her silent guardian. When the media attacked, he did not defend her publicly. That would have created more headlines. Instead, he called her privately. He listened. He reminded her that she was not the person the magazines described. Months passed. Nicole started to heal. Her eyes became softer. She began to laugh again. She took small acting jobs. She remembered who she was before the marriage. Before the fame. Before the pain. Russell watched this transformation with pride. He did not want credit. He did not want a thank you. He just wanted her to survive. But then, something shifted. A new man entered the picture. A gentle man with a guitar and a quiet voice. His name was Keith Urban. And suddenly, Russell was not the only person in Nicole's life anymore. To understand the truth that Russell finally revealed, one must first understand Keith Urban. Not the celebrity. Not the Grammy winner. The man underneath the stage lights. Keith Urban was born in New Zealand and raised in Australia. He loved music the way other children love air. He could not live without it. But Keith also carried a dark passenger inside him. A voice that told him he was never enough. As a young man, he struggled with addiction. Alcohol. Drugs. The usual escape routes for people who feel too much. He went to rehab for the first time when he was still in his 20s. Then he went again. And again. Keith was honest about his demons. But honesty does not make them go away. By the time he met Nicole Kidman in 2005, Keith had been clean for a while. But sobriety is not a finish line. It is a daily choice. Every morning, he had to wake up and decide not to fall. Nicole met him at an event in Los Angeles. She was not looking for love. She was looking for peace. But Keith walked into the room, and something strange happened. He did not try to impress her. He did not tell jokes or brag about his albums. He just stood there, holding a glass of water, looking slightly nervous. She liked that. She was tired of confident men. Tired of the swagger. Keith had no swagger. He had honesty. Their first real conversation lasted 4 hours. They talked about fear. About loneliness. About the feeling of waking up in a hotel room and not knowing which city you are in. Keith said something that Nicole never forgot. He said, "I am broken. And I might break again. But I will never lie to you about it." She had heard those words before. From Russell. Different packaging. Same meaning. The relationship moved quickly. Too quickly for some. Within a year, they were engaged. The media celebrated the romance. 2 Australians. 2 artists. 2 people who understood the price of fame. But Russell Crowe watched from a distance. And he was not celebrating. Russell saw what the public could not see. Keith Urban was fragile. Beautiful, talented, loving. But fragile. And Nicole had a history. She had spent her entire life fixing broken things. First her father, a clinical psychologist who struggled with his own pressures. Then Tom Cruise, a man whose intensity consumed everything around him. Now Keith. Russell worried that Nicole was not choosing love. He worried she was choosing a rescue mission. He tried to warn her. Not with words. Russell is not good with emotional words. He tried to warn her with coldness. He stopped returning her calls as quickly. He showed up late to dinners. He created distance. He hoped she would notice. He hoped she would ask, "What is wrong?" But Nicole was too happy to notice. Or maybe she noticed and chose to ignore it. The wedding happened in June 2006. A beautiful ceremony in Australia. Nicole wore a white dress that flowed like water. Keith wore a simple black suit and cried when he saw her walk down the aisle. Russell attended. He sat in the back row. He smiled for the photographers. But people who were there remember something strange. Russell stood at the bar alone for almost 2 hours. He did not drink much. He just stood there, holding a glass, watching the bride dance with her new husband. A guest later described his face as waiting. Like a man standing on a dock, watching a storm approach. Russell was not jealous of Keith. Not in the romantic sense. He was afraid. Because he knew something that Keith had not yet told the world. The addiction was not gone. It was just sleeping. And when it woke up, it would wake up angry. For 7 years, the marriage looked perfect. Keith released hit albums. Nicole won awards. They walked red carpets with their hands locked together. They adopted children. They built a life. But Russell kept waiting. He kept his phone close. He knew the call would come. It always does. And then, in 2013, the phone rang. It was 3 in the morning when Russell Crowe's phone lit up. He was in Canada, filming a movie. The hotel room was cold. The script for the next day was sitting on the table. He almost ignored the call. Late-night calls are never good news. But the caller ID said Nicole. He answered. And the voice on the other end was not the voice of a movie star. It was the voice of a woman falling apart. "He's gone," she whispered. "He went to the bathroom 2 hours ago. I knocked. He didn't answer. I broke the door down. He's not breathing right." Russell sat up in bed. His heart started punching his ribs. He knew what this meant. Keith had relapsed. After 7 years of sobriety. After the albums and the awards and the beautiful children. The demon had woken up. Nicole was in a hospital in Nashville. Keith was in a bed down the hall. Machines were breathing for him. Doctors were whispering about organ damage. About brain damage. About the thin line between a relapse and a funeral. Russell wanted to scream. He wanted to fly to Nashville immediately. He wanted to find whoever sold Keith the drugs and break their door down. He wanted to grab Keith by the shoulders and shake him until the stupidity fell out. But Nicole stopped him. "If you fight him," she said, her voice cracking, "I lose him. He is ashamed, Russell. He is drowning in shame. If you come here angry, he will push everyone away. Please. Just be quiet. Just stay there. That is how you help me." Russell froze. The gladiator. The man who fought for a living. The man who solved problems with noise and fury. And he was being told to do nothing. To sit in a cold hotel room in Canada while his best friend's husband almost died. That was the promise. The second promise. The heavy one. He said, "Okay." And for 10 years, he kept his mouth shut. The media reported that Keith had checked into rehab for exhaustion. The public accepted this lie. Publicists smiled. The family released a carefully worded statement. Everyone pretended that everything was fine. But Russell knew the truth. He knew that Nicole had knelt on a hospital floor. He knew that Keith had flatlined for 6 seconds. He knew that a doctor had pulled Nicole into a hallway and used the phrase "last rites." Russell carried this knowledge like a stone in his chest. He watched from afar as Nicole walked red carpets with a perfect smile. He watched as Keith held her waist like nothing had happened. He watched the world celebrate a love story that had almost ended in a hospital morgue. And he said nothing. Years passed. Keith got clean again. Real clean this time. He went to therapy. He changed his routine. He built a support system that did not depend entirely on Nicole. He did the hard work. The boring work. The kind of work that does not make headlines. Nicole stayed. She held his hand through the shame. Through the nightmares. Through the moments when he woke up crying because he dreamed about the bathroom floor. Russell watched all of this. And slowly, something inside him began to change. The anger softened. The fear faded. He started to see Keith differently. This was not a weak man who nearly destroyed a good woman. This was a sick man who got better. And the woman did not need saving. She needed to love. In 2024, Russell sat down for an interview. It was supposed to be about his new movie. But the conversation drifted. The journalist asked about old friendships. About loyalty. About Nicole. Russell paused. The room went quiet. He said, Nicole needed a savior. I was too loud to be one. Keith was quiet enough to stay. The journalist waited for more. But Russell just shrugged. He looked tired. Not tired of the questions. Tired of the wait. The world heard a compliment. A nice thing a famous actor said about an old friend. But watch the video again. Watch his eyes. His jaw. His hands. That was not a compliment. That was a confession wrapped in silence. He revealed the truth without saying a single ugly word. And what he did not say is louder than any headline. So after 20 years of silence, what did Russell Crowe finally reveal? It is not an affair. It is not a secret child. It is not a scandal that will sell magazines. It is something much more uncomfortable. And much more true. The truth is that Nicole Kidman has spent her entire life managing broken men. First her father. Then her first husband. Then Keith. Even Russell, in his own way. She is drawn to the emergency. She is addicted to the crisis. She feels most alive when someone needs her to hold them together. This is not a weakness. It is a pattern. A map of wounds she received long before she ever met a camera. The truth about Keith Urban is that he is not weak. He is a miracle. He has fought a war inside his own brain every single day for decades. And he is still standing. Still playing guitar. Still holding his wife's hand. That is not fragility. That is the strongest thing a person can do. And the truth about Russell Crowe is that he is not in love with Nicole. He is in love with the idea of saving her. He wanted to be the hero. The gladiator. The man who rode in on a horse and chased the monsters away. But Nicole did not want a hero. She wanted a human. Keith is human. He bleeds. He falls. He gets back up. He lets Nicole see him cry. Russell could never do that. He built a wall around his feelings long ago. He called it strength. But strength that cannot cry is not strength. It is a cage. So when Russell finally spoke, he was not betraying Nicole. He was surrendering. He finally admitted that he could not compete with Keith. Not because Keith is richer or more talented or more famous. But because Keith is more honest. Keith said, I need help. Russell said, I am fine. One of them was lying. Today, the three of them rarely speak. There was no dramatic fight. No public breakup of the friendship. Just distance. The slow, quiet drift of people who have said everything they needed to say. Nicole and Keith remain married. They celebrate anniversaries. They post loving photos. They seem genuinely happy. And maybe they are. Maybe the hospital floor was the worst day, and every day after that is a gift. Russell makes movies. He lives on a farm in Australia. He raises bees. He talks to his animals. He does not attend many Hollywood parties. But the contract remains. The invisible promise made in a truck near a dried-up riverbed. Russell keeps the secrets. He will never write a memoir. He will never sell a story to a tabloid. The truth about the hospital will stay inside him until he dies. That is his gift to Nicole. His final act of protection. Nicole keeps the peace. She manages the emotions. She smiles for the cameras. She makes sure everyone stays employed and happy and productive. She is the engineer of the machine. And Keith keeps breathing. One day at a time. One morning at a time. He wakes up and chooses to live. That is his part of the contract. It is not a fairy tale. There is no white horse. No castle. No magic kiss that cures everything. But maybe that is the only happy ending Hollywood has ever really had. 3 broken people, holding up different corners of the same heavy roof. Not because it is easy. Because it is real. Share this with someone who has held a heavy secret for a friend. They deserve to know they are not alone. The cameras will keep rolling. The magazines will keep printing. New rumors will replace the old ones. That is the nature of fame. But somewhere in Australia, a man in an old truck drives down a dusty road. He is alone now. The passenger seat is empty. He remembers the woman who used to sit there, crying quietly as the sun set over the fields. He wonders if she remembers those drives. He wonders if she ever thinks about the promise. And then he shakes his head and keeps driving. Because some questions do not need answers. Some love stories do not need closure. Russell Crowe finally revealed the truth. But the truth was never about Nicole or Keith. It was about him. About learning to let go of someone you love, not because they asked you to leave. But because they asked you to stay quiet. And staying quiet is the hardest fight a gladiator will ever face.